A Conviction is Something I Could Die For by Animegoil. Summary.
Besides, you'll be there. You wouldn't let anything happen to me, would you? Noé straightens up and feels the conviction flare in his bones like embers. Never. Vanitas smiles, and the predatory self-satisfaction in it makes something hot curl in Noé's stomach. There, see? No need to worry. Or, Vanitas and Noé go to another masquerade ball that is almost certainly a trap.
"5 minutes into the carriage ride to Lord Rondal's masquerade, Vanitas heaves a long-suffering sigh and pins Noé down with a half-hearted glare. "Stop fidgeting," he says. Noé immediately looks sheepish and lets go of the tassels hanging from the curtains of his window. The carriage is Dominique's, borrowed for them to attend the nearby senator's masquerade ball in Alto Paris. A favor Vanitas has not particularly wanted, but Noé had convinced him to accept. Noé runs his fingers along the embroidered edge of his magician's mask from end to end, then turns it around and does the same with the seam in the back. Vanitas sighs again. "Out with it. What's bothering you? You've been acting jumpy all day." Noé glances up and bites his lip. "Sorry, it's just... Doesn't it feel like we're walking into a trap?" "Naturally," Vanitas responded, placing his chin on his palm and letting the hint of a canine gleam through his smirk. "So you knew?" Noé said with a frown. The carriage jolts as it runs over a pothole and Noé's voice rises a notch. "After all these assassination attempts, you just accepted this invitation without a thought?" Now that both the Shasters and the vampires are keenly aware of the power of the Book of Vanitas, there have been no less than 3 assassination attempts on Vanitas. The first 2 were simple late-night brawls that Noé was able to take care of with barely any effort. They had assumed the intent was kidnapping from the way they had reached for Vanitas. The last one, however, had occurred merely a week ago in plain daylight, when Vanitas had been running an errand on his own and the first empty alleyway he went through resulted in a dagger aiming straight for his throat. It had in fact managed to slice a shallow cut across his Adam's apple, but Vanitas had ducked back into the main road and got him back to the hotel safely. Noé hasn't let him out of his sight since. Vanitas's lips thin out into a flat line. "We went over this. There's a cursed bearer involved. Even if it's too much of a coincidence to get invited just as Dante gives us intel of a cursed bearer in Rondal's household, we can't pass up the opportunity. I can't think of a better way to investigate than being personally invited to his house, can you?" Noé eyes the nearly healed scar across Vanitas' throat and drops his eye to his lap. He picks up the mask again, bending it back and forth. "I'm just worried. What if someone tries to hurt you again?" Vanitas blinks and then looks faintly embarrassed, turning his head away as he runs his fingers nonchalantly through his side ponytail. "I'll be fine." When he slides his gaze back over to Noé, his eyes are dark and intense with something Noé can't place. "Besides, you'll be there. You wouldn't let anything happen to me, would you?" Noé straightens up and feels the conviction flare in his bones like embers. "Never." Vanitas smiles, and the predatory self-satisfaction in it makes something hot curl in Noé's stomach. There, see? No need to worry. Noé has only pretended to sip from his glass, as much as it would be nice to allow the alcohol to drain the tension stringing him taut. The quartet playing in the back corner should be relaxing, but instead is shrill, grating on Noé's nerves with every crescendo as his eyes dart back and forth, looking for any glances that linger too long on Vanitas. It's nearly a futile effort with the leering masks swishing in and out of sight, specters that will never fail to remind him of Charlatan. At least the orange fox ears of Vanitas' mask makes it easy for Noé to track him as he works the room. All of his charm displayed in full force to lower guards and pick up clues they won't realize they dropped. They won't see it coming, the way Noé didn't when he first met Vanitas, when it was impossible to predict the way those luminous blue eyes would seize his every waking thought a year down the line. Monsieur, you look so forlorn. May I trouble you for a dance to liven this evening? Noé looks down at the young lady brave enough to break from the group of other debutants and step up to him. Glints of hazel eyes under the mask flutter coquettishly over a smear of blush applied a bit too strong on her cheeks. Her bosom bobs gently as she curtsies, and Noé thinks he's supposed to find that attractive, but it makes him faintly nauseated instead. Lord Rondal is a stickler for etiquette and has dueled and killed more than a few vampires who have insulted him. He remembers Dante saying a few nights ago, "I'd be very careful not to give him that opportunity, Quack." Noé swallows and takes the hand proffered. "Of course, my lady, it would be my honor." She leaves with a huff when they're done, despite the fact that Noé did his best to nod at all the right times and respond politely to all her probing questions. He can't bring himself to feel guilty, eyes trained on Vanitas' figure on the other side of the room. He's gotten closer to the end where Lord Rondal sits on a raised chaise, dressed in Roman robes with an intricate gold wreath wrapped around his head. Noé leaves his glass on a nearby table and heads over, winding between dancing couples and the chatter of 100 voices buzzing in the air. He approaches a group of men in animal masks that Vanitas is currently talking to. One of them is eyeing Vanitas with far too much interest, glimmering hunger to match his tiger's mask. A surge of irritation rises in Noé as he pointedly steps up the group by placing a hand at the small of Vanitas' back. Vanitas shoots him a look under his mask. "Ah, this is my assistant, Noé Archivist. He is the protege of the Shapeless One, if you know him." The reaction is immediate, as expected, and the conversation circles around the reluctant awe that Noé's teacher seems to inspire for a bit before it finally dies down. The men excuse themselves, though not without the one in the tiger mask taking Vanitas' hand and ghosting a kiss over it. Vanitas hums appreciatively, waving after them as Noé grinds his teeth and flexes the hand still at Vanitas' back. "You're in my way," Vanitas says when they're out of earshot, turning around to fix him with his sour look. "I didn't like how he was looking at you." Noé snaps. It's perfectly reasonable given the situation they're in for Noé to be suspicious, but he's surprised at the weight of the truth behind his words. Like somehow, despite their clarity, there are layers of implication shifting beneath the surface, and he just needs to dive in to find out more. Vanitas sighs and pinches the bridge of his nose. "That's the point. Interest is the easiest thing to exploit. I appreciate you trying to defend my honor, my dearest Noé, but I don't need it and frankly don't want it." Noé glares at the patterned collar of Vanitas' hakama and the way the indigo complements the blue-black shine of Vanitas' hair. He looks foreign and beautiful all at once, mysterious and alluring like a current of black water on a full moon's night. "Fine," he says and walks away. Noé may be annoyed, but he's even less inclined to stray far from Vanitas now. He does have to admit that Vanitas generally knows what he's doing, except for when his past is involved. Somehow that topic is the one that always throws Vanitas' actions out of realm of logical sensibility and into extremes, but that doesn't seem to be a risk today. So Noé keeps within a reasonable distance and tries to distract himself by joining a group of people talking about the impressionist trends appearing in the latest human exhibitions. Vanitas spends a significant amount of time speaking to one of the servers, but nothing seems particularly untoward about the interaction, so Noé turns his attention back to the conversation. Before long, the wit of one of the men in the group has managed to loosen some of the tension from Noé's shoulders. His wife's easy lyrical laughter is contagious, and Noé finds himself joining along with the group and falling into enthusiastic conversation. "Why don't we go into the parlor then? Lord Rondal keeps a few pieces I believe you would find quite amusing," the man says. His doctor's plague mask bobs in the air next to his wife's own. Noé hesitates, lifting his eyes to try to scan the crowd, but the wife places a hand on his arm and tugs gently. "Don't be shy, join us. The piano is there too, and you look like you have a lovely singing voice." Noé stares at her for a moment. "I thank you, but I really shouldn't, He pulls his arm away with a wooden smile, slivers of dread warming into his stomach. "If you'll excuse me, I should find my partner first." Vanitas. He hasn't checked on Vanitas for nearly half an hour. Noé raises his head, standing on his tiptoes to look above the ocean of fantastical hats and masks until he catches sight of the orange fox ears again. Ah, not so far from him, moving through the crowd towards. The dread materializes into something solid and heavy as Noé realizes that someone is leading Vanitas towards Lord Rondal. Noé pushes himself through, able to see between the crowd as the man leading Vanitas to stand in front of Lord Rondal's chase extends his hand out, presumably introducing him. Vanitas bows, perfectly calm and respectful. Noé is close enough now to catch the airy tone of Vanitas' voice complimenting Lord Rondal on his hosting. He stops just a few feet away, not wanting to interfere again if this is part of Vanitas' plan. There is a milieu of people standing around Lord Rondal, small tables with different types of bottles and cigar boxes strewn about. The Lord's robes spill luxuriously down the chase and across the floor, somehow not a speck of dirt on them. "I've heard much about you, Monsieur Vanitas," Lord Rondal says, voice gravely yet nonchalant. He is the only one not wearing a mask, narrow eyes, strong nose and stronger chin on full display. Noé gets the distant image of a beast assuring they will not eat you simply because they're already full. "Though no one mentioned your youth, how old are you, lad?" 19, my lord. Vanitas answers carefully. Ah, this will hardly end well if they're already asking Vanitas personal questions. Lord Rondal lets out a short bark of laughter. "Ha ha, barely the blink of an eye for a vampire. Quite a full life you've lived in such short years, it seems." His smile is as dangerous as Vanitas' on a bad day, all sharp teeth and insinuation. "Human lives are much like blooming flowers, a burst of beauty," and here he gives Vanitas an appreciative glance. "Then they wilt and are extinguished forever." Noé shivers, but Vanitas keeps a placid, polite smile on his face even as his eyes glint under his mask. An apt metaphor. Though a single flower may not last long, their legacy lives on through the trees, which keeps blooming year after year with thousands of swarming blossoms. Humans are much like that. The Lord's smile darkens. "With that description, you make them sound more like pests." Vanitas laughs and shrugs, his hakama slipping off one shoulder in typical Vanitas fashion. "I don't deny it, we may be the biggest plague this earth has seen yet." "Then we agree on one fundamental point, monsieur." Lord Rondal raises his wine glass. "A toast. Alonso, serve him a glass." The man who led Vanitas nods and uncorks a bottle. "This wine was given to me by an acquaintance who assures me it's quite the vintage. Please join us in toasting the lord of the house for his generosity tonight." Noé catches the sudden tension that tightens Vanitas' jaw and makes a vein in his neck jump out nervously and enticingly as he reaches out to take the filled glass, sees the way his throat works and his eyes dart around as if seeking an escape route. "A toast, then," Alonso says, and everyone raises their glass. Noé doubts it's intentional, can't imagine Vanitas deliberately calling for his help, but it's there, a silent plea written in his shrunken pupils when they land on Noé at the edge of the crowd. Noé is not, he has to admit, the sharpest knife in the kitchen when it comes to ploys and manipulation, but if there's one thing he's become remarkably good at, it's reading Vanitas. In that moment, the fear he sees crystallizes the situation, and in a flash, Noé puts together the alibi of a previously corked bottle given by a friend and an unrefusable toast and... "Pardon me," Noé says, dashing forward and swiping the glass from Vanitas' hand. "Noé, what?" "My friend here is terribly sensitive to alcohol and it makes him quite ill. I hope you let me accept the honor on his behalf." Without waiting for a response, Noé downs the glass in one long gulp. Silence rings for a moment after Noé pulls the glass away, the murmur of the crowd behind and the lively waltz all the louder for it. Noé swipes his tongue inside his mouth in an effort to dispel the dryness of the wine and search for any lingering taste of... anything, really. Vanitas looks stricken, face deathly pale under his mask, and the Lord raises one pointed eyebrow. "I applaud your swift action. I would not wish to indispose a guest of mine," he says easily and beckons for Alonso to refill the glass from the same bottle. Noé watches Lord Rondal take a sip from the same wine and relaxes. He doesn't feel anything off, nor did the wine taste unusual. Maybe they'd read the situation wrong after all. "I take it you are Noé, Archivist?" Yes, my lord, Noé says with a long bow. He catches Vanitas' wide eyes as he comes up and tries to smile reassuringly, but instead, Vanitas suddenly looks furious. What an interesting fellow. The shapeless one failed to mention you the last time we spoke. He smiles at both of them, eyes staying a bit too long on Vanitas, who has not moved an inch the entire time. I hope you will grant me some of your time at our next YA to regale me with stories of your exploits. Then they are dismissed just like that, another group stepping forward to pay their respects, leaving them discarded like fruit past its peak. What were you thinking? Vanitas seethes as they break free into a quiet hallway. His body is vibrating with anger. Or is it shaking? Noé is not sure. He's distracted by how hot the air suddenly feels, tugging clumsily at his bow tie in an effort to loosen it. I was worried. Noé mumbles as Vanitas takes his hand and leads him roughly down the hall in the opposite direction of the parlor and balconies. I thought it might be poison. Of course it was poison! Vanitas chokes out, ripping the door open and stepping within after he takes a moment to look inside. The room is dark, and Vanitas pushes him back against the closed door and locks it, then disappears. Noé is about to ask more, but his throat is too tight all of a sudden, and he has to gasp for more air. Deep breaths, Noé. Vanitas' voice comes coiled tight from the shadows until finally light bursts through from a desk lamp and illuminates what turns out to be a lavishly decorated guest room. Vanitas is back at his side in an instant, ushering him to an armchair in the corner. He kneels in front of Noé, tugging off his left glove to place his hand against Noé's forehead and neck in quick succession. You're sweating already, but no fever. What are you feeling? Give me your symptoms. He sounds so frantic. It's unusual for him. Noé thinks hazily. I don't understand. He manages between shallow breaths he can't seem to control. He drank from it too. Vanitas sighs and runs his ungloved hand through Noé's bangs, brushing them aside with light, careful fingers and pulling out a handkerchief from his pocket to dab it against Noé's forehead before letting the back of his hand rest there for a moment, refreshing and comforting. It's the first time Vanitas has ever touched him with his bare hands, and he lets out a pleased sound before realizing it. He opens his eyes. When did he close them? Just in time to see Vanitas' own widen. Then the hand is gone, and Vanitas lowers his gaze, all business as he finishes untying Noé's bow tie and helps him pull off his jacket. Noé thinks he should be embarrassed but can't muster up enough energy for the feeling, too focused on the tease of cool air against his damp collar. The good thing, I suppose, Vanitas says in a voice so bitter that Noé thinks he's being sarcastic at first, is that you're not going to die. It almost certainly was one of the many poisons that can kill a human but not cause much of an effect for a vampire. Or at least, not if said vampire didn't guzzle a full glass at once. That's why he took a sip, to help maintain his alibi. Oh, is all he can come up with, still gasping and wanting to feel Vanitas' hand again. He realizes that Vanitas took off his mask at some point, and Noé can see all of his face now. The troubled dip of his brow and the lower lip he's biting hard enough that a smidge of skin has already been ripped off. Deep pink with the promise of fresh blood just ready to burst forth. Noé can't smell it, thankfully, but even the thought is too much for him right now and he moans and lets his head drop back so he can't see it anymore. Your symptoms, Noé, Vanitas says again, more urgently this time. He presses his hand to Noé's neck again, probing gently under his jawline until he reaches just under his ear and Noé gasps uselessly, the air around him becoming stifling, sweltering, pressing in from all sides just like Vanitas' fingers. No swelling of the lymph nodes. Christ, what could it be? Which poison? Vanitas lifts his eyelids, muttering something about dilated pupils and delayed reaction time. Noé burns, feverless somehow, as Vanitas presses two fingertips against his neck to check his pulse, and all Noé wants is to return the favor with his fangs. No, he thinks, I can control this. And he can. It's not quite the overwhelming need to drink blood he'd felt that night that first heard of the beast of Jerovan. This is surging from a different part of him. Primal all the same, but different. This time he can't help take note of The silken slide of Vanitas's hair over his shoulders, the translucence of his skin, and the hint of a delicate collarbone beneath the disturbed collar of his kimono. The way his large eyes take up so much space on his face, glowing, their usual eyes melted with worry. Worry for him. "You're so beautiful," he wants to say, but Vanitas won't like that, will he? He feels almost dizzy under Vanitas' scrutiny, until he realizes he really is dizzy and it's getting worse, tossing about his stomach now. About to throw up? Noé sits up slowly, one hand grasping the arm of the chair and the other pressed against his mouth. "I think so." "That's a good thing. It will help get rid of the wine still in your stomach. Without more specific symptoms, there's not much else we can do." Vanitas slides his arms up along Noé's, and Noé hopes the resulting shiver can be attributed to the poison. Then Vanitas is pulling, hands hooked under Noé's armpits, staggering slightly against Noé's weight until Noé can gain his footing. Later, Noé will wonder how Vanitas managed to guide him to the bathroom, with Noé's dead, stumbling weight nearly draped over him. He does remember running into the doorframe and Vanitas' faint grunt under him, but he's pretty sure he would have thrown up right then and there if he'd opened his mouth to apologize. He collapses in front of the toilet, and Vanitas rearranges him into a more comfortable position until Noé can sit there, head hanging over the clear water, closing his eyes when the nausea finally blooms and he begins heaving. "Shh." Vanitas soothes, one hand rubbing up and down Noé's spasming back and the other on his forehead, holding his hair back. "Shh, it'll pass." It does, but only after what feels like hours, even if it must have been only minutes. Noé sits back, blinking the tears out of his eyes as he catches his breath, mouth sour and acrid. His stomach cramps painfully, but it feels more settled now. Still, it's too hot. He needs... Vanitas is watching him carefully, hand still on his back, and Noé wants it, feels more grounded with it, but it burns. "I'll get you some water," Vanitas says, and then his hand is gone and Noé pants, leaning his forehead against the toilet just to escape from the heat, placing his hands flat on the tile flooring to leach the coolness of the stone below. The sound of running water from the sink rises and falls, and then Vanitas is by his side again, lifting his chin with a gentle finger and placing a glass against his lips. "Drink." So Noé does, and it clears his head enough for him to whisper, "It's so hot, Vanitas." Vanitas nods and says, "Let's get you lying down for a moment." The bathroom is large, as opulent as the rest of the manor, with a clawed bathtub at one end, gilded vanity and stool, marble basin sink, and even a sofa placed along the entire length of one wall. It is there that Vanitas maneuvers Noé to, his breathing thankfully evening out once he's lying down. Vanitas' hands are back, one gloved and one bare, slipping off his bow tie entirely and unbuttoning his vest until he can pull it open completely, and then even undoing the first few buttons of his dress shirt. "More," Noé murmurs, reaching down to clumsily unbutton the rest of his shirt and shove it aside as much as possible. Vanitas makes a choked-off noise, but Noé doesn't have the energy to ask about it. The rush of fresh air on his overheated skin is heavenly, and he can feel the melee dissipating a little. All that's missing is... "I'll go call the carriage," Vanitas says from where he's crouched next to him, starting to slide his hand back into the glove. "Wait," Noé says, managing to catch the empty fingers of the fabric in a panicked rush. "Please, just your hands a little longer." Noé doesn't let go yet, pleading silently. He can't describe it, but he just needs something, anything, and it all seems to center around the feeling of Vanitas touching him and the way it burns. Not just his skin, but something deeper pulsing low in his gut, and it's all he can think of with his blood flowing sluggishly and sweat still pooling in the dips of his collarbone and the small of his back. Vanitas inhales sharply, his face flashing through a series of emotions too fast for Noé to decipher. "Of course," he says after a moment. "Anything you want." He sits on the couch so that the top of Noé's head is brushing against Vanitas' thigh. Then his hand returns, carding gently along his scalp and brushing through his bangs over and over. Noé sighs contently, his body finally relaxing, exhaustion sinking him deeply into a haze. Vanitas dabs his forehead and temples again, sliding the cloth back under his jaw, along his neck and collarbone, and Noé moans and shivers, but this time he's unsure if it's the poison or something else. He never thought Vanitas capable of this level of gentleness. He has a feeling that this moment, made of the careful guide of Vanitas's fingers against his scalp and the heat of his thigh against Noé's head, will be seared forever in his memory. At one point, Vanitas traces a hesitant finger along his jaw, but when Noé tilts his head into it, it flutters away and returns to his scalp. He doesn't know how much time has passed, but when he opens his eyes again, Vanitas is looking at him with the corner of his mouth wrenched down and something impossibly sad in his eyes. It reminds Noé of their conversation while hiding from John, back in the beginning nearly a year ago, when Noé told Vanitas about the righteousness and kindness of his actions and Vanitas had looked forlorn instead. "Hey," he murmurs, "stop making that face. I'll be fine, you said it yourself." Vanitas' entire mouth crumples and he turns his head away, voice rough as he says, "You didn't know that. You could have..." "But I didn't," Noé reminds him gently. Vanitas ignores him, head still turned away enough so that Noé can't see his expression. "It was a completely unnecessary risk. I would have figured something out." "And if you hadn't? You were scared," he wanted to say. "I couldn't leave you like that." Vanitas snorts as if the mere thought is offensive. "It was worth it," Noé insists and feels the conviction inked into his bones like a tattoo. "I promised to be your shield." Vanitas' fingers tremble against Noé's scalp. "You promised something more important, remember?" The breath he takes is equally as shaky. "You have to stay alive so you can be the one to end it all." As much as he might treasure that promise, he doesn't like the reminder of it and grumbles. "Well, I'll have to keep you alive in order to do that." That startles a laugh out of Vanitas, and even though it sounds rather watery, it's the most enchanting sound Noé has heard from him yet. A little melancholy, but painfully honest. Just not at your expense." Vanitas' voice drops into a whisper and his fingers tense on Noé's scalp. "You don't understand, Noé. I couldn't bear..." He cuts himself off there, and after a moment just huffs in annoyance. Noé suspects, with not a small twinge of regret, that they've reached the end of this topic. Sure enough, Vanitas straightens up, lifting his hand from Noé's hair and says, "I'll go call the carriage now." Noé grabs Vanitas' sleeve as he gets up and gets a flat look. "What now?" "What about the curse bearer? Didn't we need to find him?" Vanitas sighs. "I did find them. It's one of the servants in the kitchen." Then we can't leave." Noé tries to sit up, even though raising his head brings the dizziness back and his muscles respond like jelly when he tries to move. "You have to cure them." "You think I care about that right now?" Vanitas snaps, pushing him back down with a hand flat on Noé's exposed chest. He doesn't lift it immediately, instead curling his fingers into a fist as if he doesn't yet want to break the contact. The moment lengthens, the heat of his hand seeping into Noé's skin, the silence punctuated only by Noé's heavy breathing. "You can't stand it when others get hurt because of you." He learned that early on, but it's so clear in moments like this. "Why are we here, Vanitas?" Noé says quietly, reaching out to run a thumb across Vanitas' cheeks and the faded, scattered hints of freckles he can see this closely. "What is your goal?" His has morphed over the year. It started out with determining the nature of the book, then a desire to save vampires so that Luis's tragedy would never occur again, but above all those, a new one has arisen. Vanitas growls, waiting a beat before he finally raises his eye to glare at Noé. "Fine, you insufferable fool. I'll be back. Don't you dare move from here." Noé doesn't know how long it takes, falling into a fitful doze while he continues to sweat and shiver, stomach cramping occasionally, though thankfully the nausea doesn't come back. Snatches of dreams filter through, of black blood seeping from Vanitas' eyes and nose, of his single, ungloved hand slipping through Noé's and falling into a pit of darkness that looks like Nania's eyes. The sound of a faucet rouses him, but it becomes secondary to the smell of Vanitas' blood overpowering him, alkaline, sweet, and fresh. His stomach contracts with hunger instead of illness this time, but Noé has gotten regrettably used to this after the number of injuries he's been witness to on Vanitas. Vanitas? He calls out and pushes himself up on one elbow, the world tilting dangerously, blue and gold tiles blending into sickly green. Stay still, he hears Vanitas snarl through a whirl of colors in his head. I told you not to move. Noé falls back, panting a little. Are you okay? There's blood. Don't worry, I'm washing it off. Which is not at all what Noé's asking. The curse bearer tried to attack just as I was curing him, but it's only a scratch. The faucet turns off, followed by the sound of cloth over skin and the careful rip of what Noé recognizes as gauze. Are you sure? Noé asks, craning his head to look at Vanitas, who tosses a pink-stained washcloth into the trash. One of his sleeves is soaked in water, but a faint stain still remains outlining the edges of the blood he washed off. The scent is nearly back to the normal, tolerable levels Noé is used to, even if he's weaker to the effects of it right now. His gums prickling where his fangs want to poke through, and his throat dry as if he hadn't just drank water a short while ago. Yes, I'm sure, Vanitas says, kneeling next to him. He lets Noé push the sleeve up to inspect his forearm, just above the elbow, but the patch of bandages under the gauze is small and no more blood is leaking through, so Noé believes him. More importantly, how are you feeling? Any new symptoms? Vanitas has removed his left glove again and is once more feeling Noé's forehead and neck, taking his pulse. Fretting? Noé's brain supplies with amusement. Better, he tells him. I think lying down helped. Good. Looks like this manifested as nothing more than food poisoning then. Vanitas says, taking hold of the bottom of Noé's shirt and one by one beginning to button it. His dark, delicate lashes obscure his eyes and his fingers are steady and brisk as they make their way up. But Noé notes curiously that the tips of his ears are faintly red and halfway through he swallows once, hard, pale Adam's apple with that tiny, mostly healed cut bobbing as if something were stuck in his throat. Noé's pulse stutters at the sight, and he has to fist his hands to keep from gripping Vanitas' arms and asking him to stop, or is it start? God, something! The skittering feel of those nimble fingers on his chest make him feel hot all over again, lower and deeper and tighter this time. Vanitas lingers a moment too long on the last button at the base of Noé's throat, and Noé opens his mouth, unsure if he's about to say Vanitas' name or try to ask a question he's not sure either of them know the answer to, or God forbid, moan. But then Vanitas seems to come into himself with a sharp inhale and the barest shudder, standing up hastily to wipe his hands on his pants as if trying to shake something off. Well, he says, slightly hoarse and suddenly preoccupied with fixing his outfit. Do you think you can lean on me, or do I need to get the coachman to help me carry you? It takes Noé a second to answer, mouth still open but no breath coming out. He takes stock of his body and pointedly ignores the feeling still pooled low in his gut before he sits up, slow and carefully this time, waiting for the vertigo to dissipate and his pulse to slow. He clears his throat. A little dizzy, but I think I can make it. Vanitas watches him intently for a moment before dragging his hand over his face and replacing his glove. I still can't believe you, you absolute fool, he said with a half-hearted slap to the side of Noé's head. But there's no real bite to his words, just as there's no real strength behind the blow. Noé can't help the cheeky grin that appears on his face, even if the back of his brain is still chasing that fragile moment of intimacy that had just burst. Normal people say thank you, or I'm glad you're feeling better, you know. This has the intended effect of a spectacular blush and a blurted out, Shut up! Noé ducks his head to hide his smile. He doesn't need Vanitas to say it, even if he hadn't seen it written in every glance and touch tonight. His belief in Vanitas has grown into something closer to conviction, and a conviction is something he could see himself dying for, over and over. Ooh, the tension is crazy with this one. I think my favorite part of this fic is the dialogue, for how accurate it feels to the characters. Every line and every action the characters make play just like a canon episode, and I'm hoping my narration was well enough to deliver that. Thank you so much for giving me permission to podfic this Animegoil, and super sorry for the late delivery. I hope you enjoyed listening to this just as much as I've enjoyed reading your lovely work. And thank you, dear listeners, for watching. If you'd like to show more support, I'm available on Ko-fi, and Super Thanks is now available. Hope you have a great week. Till next time.